Have you ever wondered about what the challenges of the RA position are? Now, RA position can have a lot of benefits. You could have housing covered, you could have a meal plan covered, you can have the potential for working paid hours at a community front desk, and not to mention all the resume building skills. But there is a lot of downsides to the RA position, or challenges that can be hard to overcome, depending on your lifestyle and how you feel about them. In today's video, we are going to chat all about the challenges of being in the RA role. Now, the goal of this video is to not just be negative about the RA position, but I want you and your student to have a full picture of the RA position. So last week we talked about the benefits of the RA position, and now this week we're talking about the challenges, so you can go into this position, whether your student wants to apply to or not, with completely knowing all the facts. So if you're new here, my name is Shannon. If you're coming back for more, welcome back. I have been working in the college field for over 12 years. My jobs included working in on-campus housing, working in scholarships and financial aid, as well as working behind the scene with donors to create scholarships. I love creating videos. So on YouTube, I create new videos every Monday and Friday. Monday is my college series, so all things dorm life, RAs, scholarships, on-campus jobs. And my Friday videos are way more personal, about my life with my young kids, as well as tips and parenting tricks and cleaning motivation. Really, I'm using all my knowledge from my years working at colleges, as well as my numerous years supervising an RA, and then back being an RA when I was a student, to provide you the information for today's video. So we're gonna go ahead and jump on into one of the biggest challenges of the RA position, which is the time commitment. Now, being an RA comes with a big time commitment. Typically, the RA position is considered to be a 20 hours per week position, but let's really talk about that. You are, as an RA, living in the dorm. So you live where you work, whether or not you have your own room or not, depending on the institution, but you are there where you live. So you are working, you are studying, doing schoolwork, maybe you're working the community front desk. You have all your RA responsibilities, whether that is completing bulletin boards, that is doing community safety checks, or being on duty, on call. You're dealing with any emergency situations or residents knocking on your door. It is technically, when you look at like the responsibilities, it's supposed to be 20 hours per week. But because you live where you work, there's an added aspect of things can happen at any point. At any time of the day, your residents could knock on your door and need assistance. And depending on the school, you may have a policy that allows you to kind of gently guide them to another RA who is on call to help them. But you may not always have that. You may need to help them in that moment, especially if you have a really great relationship with them and help them through whatever their challenges or answer their question. You may also have to respond to emergency situations. So let's say the fire alarm goes off, which depending on the school you work at, they might go off frequently. And so regardless of what's going on with your personal life, if the fire alarm goes off in the building, you have to evacuate with everybody else and put on your RA hat and be able to help students get out of the building, get to the evacuation zone safely, and deal with any issues or instructions from supervisors. You also have lockouts. So many times RAs are called to respond to lockouts, so letting students back into their room if they lock themselves out, usually leaving their key or ID in their bedroom. So depending on the school and the policy, that could only be when you're on duty. They could have room phones in the rooms where they call you, or a group messaging system to see if whoever's available to do those lockouts. And so that's a possibility. There's also the consideration of nights off. So in the RA position, typically in the RA contract, you are required to sleep in your room every night. And you have to request time off to sleep outside of the community. Now, really, this is for ratios, so you're wanting, as a supervisor, to have at least half your staff sleeping in their rooms every night to be able to respond to emergencies. So let's say you have a building with 16 RAs. Typically, you're not going to allow more than 8 of them to have a night off. That way, you have enough staff to handle any emergency situations. You have, maybe 3 people on duty. You have people who are there to respond to lockouts. You have enough staff to handle evacuating the building if there is a fire alarm that goes off or another emergency situation, and enough eyes and ears in the building to listen and hear for things if things are going on. Now, depending on the school, that might be different, but typically RAs have to request those nights off. And so that can be hard sometimes, because many times it's about planning them in advance. So you're requesting to your supervisor to having, certain nights off or a weekend off, just like you would if you worked a regular 9-to-5 job and you're requesting PTO. And it could be approved or denied based on how many people are already out of the building. There's also times where there is no time off allowed. So typically schools will not allow time off around holiday weekends. So that could be Labor Day, Halloween, St. Patrick's Day. In California, that's often Cesar Chavez Day, because students unfortunately use that holiday for the wrong reasons. Drinking holidays are typically when staff are not allowed to take time off and be out of the community, because more situations happen during those weekends, and so they need more staff. But this also includes usually the first and last weekend of each semester or quarter, because that's when students are moving in or they're leaving. There's so much going on, people in and out of the community, that they need all hands on deck to help with things. So it can be a bit frustrating requesting that time off or that PTO to leave, especially if you are already out with friends and you were at the movies or hanging out and now you want to go stay at a friend's house or a significant other's house. Depending on the school, they will have a procedure for that of how you request that time off, like in the moment. But oftentimes it's a request in advance thing, and you can be held accountable if you do not follow that policy. I have had to let RAs go before who consistently went and stayed off campus with a significant other and did not request that time off because they are violating their contract, which they do sign for the position. So it can be challenging, but it's also all about scheduling. Many schools provide enough PTO, so there's at least one night per week where students can go. So if it's a 16-week semester, they have 16 nights off. They can use however they want throughout that semester as long as it's approved. But also, there's tons of situations where they're not needed to use those time offs. So anytime there's family emergencies, there's illness, things happening, typically supervisors won't count those towards the nights off, but they'll approve the student to be out of the community. Because if you're sick, if your loved ones are sick, if there's a wedding, we don't want you to use your time off for that. Take care of you, take care of your family. Use it for when you just want to go hang out with your friends, you want to go to a concert, you want to travel back home to hang out. So really the time commitment is the biggest thing, because you are typically working 20 hours per week of RA related duties. You could be called upon 24 hours a day, even if you're not on duty, to be able to go handle situations and emergency situations or have residents knock on your door. Plus you're being a student. Now this doesn't always leave a lot of room for extras. Sometimes it's more challenging to have an extra internship, to have an extra job, to be an athlete. That can be really challenging if you are a competitive athlete versus more of a social athlete. Those can be difficult to manage. It is possible though. I've supervised athletes who are competitive, D2 athletes, and make the RA position work. It's just a lot of give and take and being super organized. So really it's about, can you fit this in as a lifestyle? It's not just a job. The RA role is a lifestyle because you live where you work. You have to figure out how to make it all work at the same time. Now, a big area of the RA job is responsibility. There's so many responsibilities with being an RA, and I'm just gonna cover the top ones that come to mind, with the first one being of responding to emergency situations. Now, like I've mentioned quite a few times, if you're an RA, whether or not you're on duty, so you're not on call and the fire alarm goes off, you gotta get out of the building, you gotta help evacuate everybody out of the building and work with the supervisor who is there to figure out when it is appropriate to help let students back into the building or not. And depending on those responsibilities, it can be quite a bit of work. A fire alarm is not usually a 15-minute ordeal. It's oftentimes a 30, 45 hour ordeal for RAs because they're evacuating themselves and the building. We're waiting for the fire department to come and clear the issue. And then it's letting all the students back in, which sometimes if it's a large tower building, you have to have RAs work at different stations to help manage the crowd so not everyone just rushes in at once. Now, there's also situations where a resident may just come in, bang on your door because they are physically injured, they are emotionally going through something, they found a student intoxicated or in dire need of help in the community bathroom, and you're who they first thought of, or you have the closest bedroom, and so you may be called upon to be first on the scene and then can call the RAs on duty to help from there. It's just a lot of responsibility with those emergency situations because You do have sometimes people's lives in your hand, but RAs are trained to know how to respond to those situations, how to call on others for help, but they can happen at any time. And I always say it happens when you least expect it. And so some things with this, I always recommend RAs have shoes and maybe an RA sweatshirt or a different sweatshirt by their bed, maybe slippers they're willing to wear outside, just so they, depending on when a fire alarm goes off, if it's in the middle of the night like they like to be, they're ready to go. Or if someone bangs on their door, they have shoes and a sweatshirt easily in reach to be able to put that on over their PJs. Now, another big responsibility of the RA job is responding to policy violations. So RAs are responsible, whether they're on duty or not, to be able to address policy violations. Now, this could be easy things of you caught students with some alcohol bottles, to students are extremely intoxicated, they have flags or tapestries, things in their room that are not allowed on campus, like candles are typically not allowed because they're a big fire hazard. Depending on the situation, the students need to have backup. So if they stumble upon a situation, they need to call someone else to help them address it. So there's more than one witness there. Depending on the situation, you could be dealing with a lot of students at once. And so managing the crowd and everyone while dealing with it. Typically, you are getting everyone's IDs and information so you know who is actually involved. You're figuring out what is needed. Do they need EMS? Do they need a supervisor to come down? Are you all able to clear them on your own? There's lots of steps that go on addressing a policy violation. Depending on the school, sometimes an RA is able to pass situations on to the RA on duty. Sometimes it's appropriate, sometimes it's not. I'd say as an RA, I once had a situation where I was finishing a paper that was due at midnight with my door open in my dorm. This is not a good situation all around because I procrastinated and then I decided to do it in the dorm. Like I really should have gone to the library. But it was already 10 p.m. and I needed to get done and submitted before midnight. And 2 doors down, my students were very obviously smoking in the building. And so I called the RAs on duty and was like, hey, I need you all to handle this, please. Here's everything I heard. Here's everything I saw. I have a paper due in 2 hours, like I need your help. And I built great relationships with my friends and my RAs, so they were able to handle that for me at the time. But, if we didn't have that kind of relationship or something bigger was going on, I might have needed to get more involved, and that would have taken me away from doing my paper that was due that I procrastinated on. So really, policy violations happen at any point. They always have to be addressed. It causes bigger issues if RAs do not address policy violations. That's a whole different video we can go into. But really, it's about responding and getting everything done. Now, once a situation is handled, that's not the end of it for the RAs. So let's say you had students that had a bunch of alcohol in their room, they were throwing a party, but nobody's like super intoxicated to where you need EMS or you need a supervisor. You work with the students to find out who everyone is, you get all the alcohol disposed of, call it a night on that situation. RAs then need to still go write their report about what happened. And so he's talked about in the benefits in RA position video that report writing is a benefit because you can use that in future careers. Reports do take some time. So RAs, whoever responded to the incident, will work together to go sit maybe in someone's room or in a computer lab, and they have to type up that report. Many schools require the report in third person, so sometimes that takes a little extra brain power if you're not used to doing it that way, to write up that report that then is used in conduct cases for the students who were involved to address the policy violation. So as RAs, you are reporting what's happening, and then supervisors and people who work in conduct actually address the issues later. You are first responders, and then there's people who actually hold people accountable for it. But writing that report can take some time. So if an incident took a half an hour because there was 40 people jammed into a dorm room, which does happen, it's ridiculous. It's like a clown car. You then are going to take some time to write that report because a lot happened during that report. And while you're doing while you're dealing with the issue, everyone's taking notes, trying to make sure you have all your facts straight. So it's not just over once the situation's over. You then have to go report. So that responsibility of addressing the policy violation and then the responsibility of writing the report can be a lot and take a lot of time. So beyond responsibilities, I want to talk about a few other aspects that come into play with the RA position that could be challenging. One of them is needing another job. So the RA position itself may allow for your student to have housing and food covered or whatever their compensation package is, but they may need to work additional hours to make ends meet. So depending on the school, they may have the opportunity to work for the school community front desk, for the dorms, mailroom, other on-campus positions. But those are extra hours that they are outside of the building. They are working an actual job and not doing their homework or their RA responsibilities. And then on top of that, if they're not working on an on-campus job, they might be working off-campus in retail and food service, wherever has flexible hours. And sometimes that can be extra amount of stress. You know, you're balancing your school schedule, your RA schedule, then your job schedule, whether that job's on campus or off. On-campus jobs are typically way more flexible, and if you tell them straight up that you're an RA, usually they work with you more, where on-campus positions may not be as accommodating. And sometimes we've even had to have conversations with RAs of like, you're gonna need to choose between your RA work and your off-campus job, which is a terrible conversation as a supervisor to have because we know students need money. Like, college is not cheap, college is expensive, but sometimes if you're trying to work 20, 30 hours in an off-campus job and have the RA position and have school, something is gonna fall. Something is gonna get left behind. You're not gonna make grades, you're not gonna meet all your expectations with the RA job or with your other off-campus job. So sometimes it is that challenge of deciding of what is most important. Is having the RA role most important? Is having physical cash from working off-campus job more important? What needs to bend to make it all work? And so that can be a big challenge for some people. Now this one is one I typically have younger RAs. And when I mean younger, I mean new RAs. I don't mean younger as an age range. If you're a new RA, this is something you may struggle with in general, is being seen as the bad guy. Now, as we talked about earlier, RAs are required to respond and report any policy violations that they see happening. So alcohol, having things in their room they're not supposed to have, drugs, fights, domestic violence situations, all the things. And it's really hard sometimes to balance that relationship between being friendly and like big sibling-like with your residents and addressing the policy violations. And there's many stories I'll share in future videos of times where RAs have failed or succeeded in this, but it can be really hard to be like, like, man, why do you have to write me up? Like, we're such good friends. Like, we don't have to do it. It was just one beer. That will happen. In most situations when you're addressing a policy violation, students are going to challenge you and ask why you're doing this. Like, can't you just be cool? Can't you just let it go? Can't we just pretend it didn't happen? Oh, we'll just get rid of the alcohol right now. It's no big deal. No one's intoxicated. No one's hurt. But as an RA, the core part of your job is reporting policy violations and keeping people safe. And so those have to be addressed. And so sometimes you do lose some of that relationship building with your students because they decided to break policy and do the things that they were doing. At the end of the day, it's not the RA's fault that the students chose to do this behavior. And sometimes you can do some pre-work as an RA of having those conversations with students at the beginning of the year and reminding them throughout the year of like, no matter what, you care about them, but like you have to do your job. But being seen as the bad person, as the person who has to make them get in trouble, can be really challenging. Now, truthfully, as an RA, you're never the person who got them in trouble. They got themselves in trouble, but you are the person that's reporting it. So in their minds, they're blaming the situation on you and not on themselves for their own behavior. Let's talk about being on duty and being on call. Now, this can be its own challenge because depending on the school, depending on the community, there's going to be different needs. At most of the institutions I worked at, students were on call one night a week. So weeknights were Sunday through Thursday. So one of those nights you were on call with another duty partner or two duty partners to do community safety checks and to make sure the community is safe. Beyond that, there's also weekend duty. So that's Friday and Saturday nights, the busier nights. Some schools have it also include Thursday or include Sunday, where typically more policy violations are happening because students have more free time. They're not in class and they're choosing to do different activities. And so typically at the beginning of the semester or the quarter, RAs will work together with their supervisors to schedule out what their normal duty weeknight is and then their weekend duties. So at many schools I worked at, you would have your weeknight duty every single week, and then you might have 3 or 4 weekends of the semester that you're on call. Now, life happens. Things need to change. And so RAs can work together to switch duty nights, to switch duty weekends, depending on what's going on. If someone has an event coming up or a school thing coming up, things can be changed. But having that consistent of like, you have to be in the community from this time to this time. For most of the times, it was like 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. the next day. Like, you have to be in the community. You might be holding the duty phone. You're going to be doing community checks, which might be 3 or 4 checks a night where you're walking the whole community with your fellow RAs. You have to be available because if something happens at all during that time, you have to be able to respond. So it's not the time to be like taking a shower or doing important schoolwork, because you may have to respond to things. So that can be a bit of a challenge because you have that restriction on where you're allowed to go, and at any point you can be called. So duty can be exhausting. Sometimes it can be stressful. Depending on your anxiety, having a duty phone might make you anxious. I know even when I was pro staff, I would not go to sleep having the duty phone until like after I knew the RAs were typically done with their last set of rounds or community safety checks, because I always felt like I'm gonna fall asleep and then I'm gonna get called. And sometimes when you're on duty, you do get those calls after you're asleep. Like, let's say you did all your safety checks, everything's good, and you go to bed, and then you get called at 4 a.m. for a lockout for a student that needs help, or a situation happens and you're gonna get woken up in the middle of the night. And so being on duty can be a big challenge. It can be exhausting. It can take away some of your sleep, some of your freedom, but something you can work around and learn to manage. You have to plan. You have to plan to do your homework ahead of time. And you have to plan to shower ahead of time, or strategically shower and not have the phone while you're showering. You may need to really think about what are your priorities for during that time so that you can feel relaxed and taking care of yourself while also handling your responsibilities. So the last big challenge I want to talk about is conflict management. Now, as we've talked about earlier, RAs have to report incidences or report policy violations that are happening. And that is conflict. You have conversations with students. They don't want to be documented for the behavior that they did that violated policies. But also there's going to be times where as an RA, you have to manage roommate disagreements. You have to manage disagreements between people on the floor or different floors and have those conversations. And sometimes it can be the hardest thing to remain neutral in those kind of conversations, especially when you personally agree with one party. A great example of this is many times you're going to have roommate disagreements where one roommate is way messier than the other. Like, they have different standards of clean, and your standard of clean may align with one of the residents. And so it can be challenging to mediate those conversations yourself, get those students to a place where they can make compromises, where they can make decisions on things together, when you are personally biased towards one of the students, whether that is you have the same beliefs as them for the situation, if you just know one of them better, you have a better relationship with them in general, that can be really challenging. So it's hard to have those kind of conversations. It's hard to be unbiased. It's hard to address policy violation. And these can be exhausting because sometimes, it can be a simple thing students are arguing about, of like, doing their laundry. Like, hey, can you please do your laundry once a week? And the other roommate's like, nah, I'm not gonna do it, even though it stinks. And you feel like banging your head against the wall. It can be challenging, but you as an RA have to mediate those conversations. And so really the conflict management aspect is ongoing all the time. There's gonna be those conflicts that happen when you're on duty. There's gonna be conflicts that happen when you're not on duty. You have to be okay, like I said earlier, with being seen as the bad person who's documenting situations, but also being able to figure out how to be neutral in times where you are frustrated, or you have a better relationship with somebody, or you have your own personal beliefs that align with someone over another person. And so that can be really challenging as an RA, as a student, as someone who doesn't have their full frontal cortex fully developed yet, because you yourself are a student. And so it's something that's going to have to be mediated. And the benefit with this is, like, every RA has supervisors. There are supervisors who've gone through this before, because most of them have been RAs and college students themselves, who are here to support you through this journey and through helping students. So if a situation gets out of hand, if you're like, oh my gosh, we need an adult's help, there's always going to be a professional staff member on call who can be called in if it's needed in the moment, or you can always pause conversations if it's a roommate disagreement and make a meeting with a supervisor to help you navigate that situation. I, as an RA supervisor, did that many times where my students would be dealing with roommate conflicts and it would just get too out of hand, or they'd have too much trouble getting them to a happy medium. And then they would stop the conversation, schedule a meeting with me to come in and navigate the situation, because sometimes you just need somebody who is one up with a little bit more authority for students to take them seriously and to get that middle ground, or because they have more experience, are able to navigate that conversation different and help you through it. It is all possible. There's supervisors there to help if needed. It's just about figuring it out as you go. So y'all, those were the main challenges of the RA position from my experience being an RA myself and also being a supervisor of RAs. There are many more, and depending on who your student is as an individual, challenges will vary based on time management skills, based on things that they like or don't like to do, or also depending on the college they're at or the community they're assigned to, depending on the residents that they have in the community at that time. Some years you have residents who are amazing, and some years you have residents who are little shits. It just depends on the year. There's many times where I worked as an RA or as professional staff, and I'd be like, man, second floor is amazing, and third floor is full of terrible humans who just want to challenge everything. It happens. Every year is different based on all different kinds of factors. But at the end of the day, all of these challenges can be mediated. Supervisors can help students, your students can help themselves. It just depends on if you want to make the RA position work. Now, I'm not saying every situation is going to be able to be fixed. There's going to be times where your student might be like, I'm done. This is too much responsibility. This is too much drama. I want a normal college life. And that is completely okay. The RA job is not for everybody, and sometimes the RA job changes. Your student could be an amazing RA one year and have a great time, and then next year they're just like, this is not it. And it's okay sometimes to walk away from the RA job, but there's also resources and ways to make it manageable if that's what you and your student want to happen. Alrighty, y'all, so those are my challenges of the RA position. If you liked this content, please feel free to like the video and follow me here on YouTube. If you'd like daily content, I post daily to YouTube Shorts, Instagram, and TikTok. More content focusing on parenting and my life with littles or cleaning motivation, but all the kind of things that can help you on your parenting journey. If you yourself or your student has been an RA and they experience other challenges that I mentioned today, please put them in the comments below so we can help one another and I can add those to my list for the future. I hope you all are having a wonderful day and staying healthy, and I hope to see you soon.